So let's get started. The minutes for the last two meetings were sent out. Did anybody have any corrections, changes to these minutes?
I have one.
Sure. Which one?
The first one, I think.
The special meeting, the January 9th?
It's pretty obvious. Diane and I were both referred to as Misters in one paragraph. Just
Excuse
minor edit.
I apologize. I've been on the other side of that too, so don't worry.
You noticed that?
I've been on the other side. Kept the miss.
That will be changed.
But I spelled it right.
Absolutely. Everything else is perfect. And it is just one letter. So.
Sorry. Were there any other changes to the minutes, either sets of minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve? Mike and then Duke. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. The first item of business is for Diane to give us a quick rundown of what we covered in our last workshop.
Yeah, so we met on the 16th of January for Design Development Workshop number 2. Most of what we're seeing is still kind of more design development on what we agreed to in schematic design, but we're seeing everything in a bit more detail. In general, we saw some site plan updates, looking at the more detailed design of parking, including strategies to make the parking lots a little bit safer, and inclusion of vegetation on the islands, some more detailed design of outdoor spaces. We looked at fields, playgrounds, cafeteria spill-out space, outdoor classrooms, and we looked at some modifications of the service area to make that safer as well. And then we looked at more detailed design of the courtyard.
Morning.
We looked at plan building updates, a more careful delineation of the pod layout with a shared space. We looked at, in general, as I said, most of what we agreed on schematic design is kind of being carried through in the design in more detail. Exterior design, the big changes were we saw the flat roofs throughout on the building, which we had agreed to, and we're seeing a red brick exterior with a lot of glazing at the entrance. So again, that's all kind of in the development. We'll see a bit more of that today. We have another design development workshop meeting after this meeting, which will be focused. We'll see some updates on the exterior design, but it'll be focused primarily on interior design. SLAM is in the midst of a series of meetings with users over at Ox Ridge, looking at all the detailed space needs, and a lot of that will start manifesting itself in the interior design and the equipment selection and all the furniture selection. And I think Luke's been quite busy, and Amy's been in town going to meeting with all the Ox Ridge folks. So I think that was primarily it. Moving along smoothly, no real bumps there. And again, we have another meeting after this meeting where we'll continue on. The other update I wanted to give the committee was on the Net Zero Schools Conference that happened at Yale last Friday. It was really interesting. It was sponsored by the National Ready Mix Concrete Association, which I hadn't realized going in. So the first half of the program was all about concrete. That being said, it's really fascinating to see there were 4 different companies that came and presented the products they have in development and in use, actually, which are sequestering carbon in concrete. And it's for the concrete industry, it's a really exciting direction because they see this as a way of shifting building construction from carbon intensive to carbon sequestering. So it's a way to offset all the carbon that's used in the building in really simple kind of admixes or new aggregates or whatever it might be. They're sequestering the carbon out of the smokestack and putting it back into the concrete. So it's pretty exciting. A number of representatives from SLAM were at the conference, including Kemp and Amy and Greg. So I think they're all kind of interested, is this happening in Connecticut? I think they're pretty much at the cutting edge and considering if it's feasible for our project. I'm not really sure. But so other than the talk about the concrete, there were 2 really interesting presentations by an architect and an engineer from Kentucky about net zero schools. And those presentations will be provided to the people who went to this conference, and I will share them with you all or post them on the SLAM website as necessary. Those were really interesting. And I'm happy to say that most of the net zero issues that they discussed, as well as the kind of 20th century learning objectives, were all things we've been talking about in our school. So I felt really great that there was no big area that we're missing that some other architects or engineers are working on. So there were a couple really interesting implementation of low energy buildings, has how to keep, the big issue is keeping the users using less energy over time. So I'll kind of raise those as we go forward. But for the most part, as I said, I felt that what was raised in that meeting is a lot of things that we've been addressing, and our architects were all there paying attention and listening, so I appreciated that as well. And then, yeah, I think that's it. As I said, I'll share any links to any interesting presentations on that if anyone's interested.
Anybody have any questions about where we are in design development? Okay. Duke, what happened up at the state?
So I think Diane, Dr. Adley, myself, and Slam attended the meeting. Michelle, Costas' deputy, was up there along with Kermit and Barbara, who are the architects. I think overall the meeting was very positive. A lot of conversation around the size of the school. They wanted to understand the decrease in the size from around 107 to 104 from when we submitted the original application. Slam did a great job of just laying out on the table the overall design of the school and stuff that we've been talking about through the design phase and the schematic phase. We looked at everything from parking to size of classrooms to hallways. They wanted to understand the ELP program consolidation again and enrollment numbers. They wanted to understand the DLC classrooms throughout. Again, some pushback on the overall size of the school. They were very clear in also stating that we understand we can push back and guide and give some comments, but still the majority of this is on your dime. So they were pretty clear about that. But I think we talked through the concept of the cubbies being outside or the lockers being outside, the size of the hallways. They were very interested in hearing about what we plan to do with the space in the hallways in terms of additional learning space and space for teachers and students to group and talk and do different things academically. But overall, I think where we are was positively received. They love the concept of us broadly trying to get rid of portables throughout the school district. We talked about that. We also talked about the enabling phase, and so there was a lot of discussion around what we're trying to do there. I think they understood that. I wouldn't say pushback, but they felt that there was no reason we couldn't get everything submitted that needed to be submitted. That enabling phase couldn't be part of the overall reimbursement for the project in terms of what could be reimbursable as we go through that project. So that's something I know through emails this week we've been working through with Dave Cravenzola and all on getting things submitted for that enabling phase, so that could be part of the overall submittal for reimbursement from the state.
Provided they can move quickly.
Exactly, which they felt they could, and they didn't see any issue with the timelines. I don't know, anything else to add, Diane?
Yeah, I'd like to add that that I agree that the state really was reacted really favorably to the plan. As you said, they were really supportive of those learning corridors. They thought that was, they're seeing that as kind of the future of where the learning is happening in the classroom. And then also the gymnasium size, they were really in support of. They thought that we were putting a middle school size gym was a real plus, and is something a lot of the elementary schools could do. And they're very supportive also of sizing the cafeteria in such a way where we could have less waves of dining. And they thought that was really an important part of the design. And also they felt that the plan, they didn't think there was a lot of fluff. They thought, you know, they kept looking at it and really felt like everything was sized right. So we felt good just having that affirmation that our plan is, doesn't have anything egregious going on.
I think at first the overall layout of the school was kind of like wide eyes on the table, but then as we talked through it in terms of the size of the school relative to what we're trying to do, how we're trying to position it on the property, the challenges associated with that, and as we talked through how we're using it from an educational standpoint, they really came around and felt we were heading in the right direction is my takeaway.
So Michelle was kind of nice?
You know, she, as we went through the process.
Is that too much?
I think as we went through the process, you know, I think she's a tough cookie and should be, but I think as we went through the process, I think at the end of the day, and Alan, you know those folks up there also, I think she respected everything that we're doing and how we're doing it, and definitely our communication with the state. I think that all comes through in these meetings.
That's good. That's great. Hope we can get the enabling in. I passed out, or I sent out to everybody our spend to date, and if there's any questions, we'll just sort of let that be as it is. We're going to keep reporting on this every meeting so that you have an idea where we're at. Obviously, SLAM has been the biggest vendor we've been paying so far. Hopefully, we'll have a contract with them soon. So, are there any questions about what we're spending or have spent? Okay. Rusty, our enabling phase.
I'd like to yield the floor, Mr. Chairman, to Katie to bring us up to date on the last meeting at the school for us before I jump into that.
Sure, thank you. We had what I thought was a really positive enabling meeting. Both Luke and Mike were there, as well as Amy and myself. And I thought that we were really able to talk through what specifically was going to need to move and go through a few iterations to find who would be in the best places. Mike actually had an idea that I think could really be the best solution for all the kids and the students, which would be to possibly place a double portable in that area near the receiving by the kitchen that we had talked about, to serve as an interim cafeteria space.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that way we would be able to use the existing cafeteria for classroom spaces, thereby keeping all of our K through 5 classrooms in the main building. You know, we tossed around other ideas about potentially like moving out 5th grade into the back portables. And just as a parent, that wasn't an idea that I was really comfortable with. Currently, none of us like the portables, but the kids do go out there for one period of the day as a class, and then they come back in. Were we to move an entire classroom out there for an entire year, anytime a kid was coming in to go to the bathroom, going to the nurse, anything, there would just be a lot more back and forth in between that unsecured space. So I think that the idea of using the existing cafeteria as classrooms and then being able to host the lunch waves in a temporary space is a better idea. Mike also seemed confident that it wouldn't pose any extra sort of burden on our food services, that this is a common thing, that the food can be prepared inside and just wheeled right out, and that it should be pretty seamless, especially since we'll be having new service providers for the existing school year.
Katie, does the minutes that Amy sent out, does it adequately reflect all of your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I must have missed this.
That was-
Does that double wide accommodate the current waves? It does, no
Yeah.
changing in waves or size of waves or anything like that?
Yes, this is lovely. We all took lots of notes, but this is much cleaner.
But
Right, so there was a lot of talk about moving art rooms and getting sinks and who could, so I thought that the conversation was very thoughtful about meeting everyone's needs. Luke or Mike, did you have anything to add?
No. Well summarized.
Well, the question was just asked about the size. So if you take a double portable, it's about 700 to 800 square foot each side, so you're about 1,600. And right now, when we have the cafeteria going in waves, we're only using half of the space now. So you would have a big enough space to have a serving area and seating for the 6 waves. And then it can stay closed and locked in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day.
Right.
It's not something people are going to be going in and out of, so.
Great. So this is pretty much the agreed upon plan.
Yeah,
Good.
Can we get a formal agreement from the district after the discussion, internal discussion?
After the internal discussions?
Well, I assume you want to get involved.
Well, yes, I do.
Yes,
I actually just need to, and I'll honestly review that just to make sure that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, well,
Thank you.
And the next part of it, Rusty?
Okay, the next, these are just 4 of the bulletins that we have to get going on, many of which are already in motion. As you know, we're in February. We're supposed to break ground in the middle of June, so it's going to be a tight schedule. The second, in addition to that, is the confirmation that the grant availability and confirmation that they can actually do it. So what we need from them is, what is the last date that we can give them? So I know they said they could speed it up, but we need that date, the drop dead date. And secondly, what exactly do they need from us? And I'm sure SLAM and ONG can help you out. But as soon as we get those lists and the date, then we'll be in a lot better shape to know if we can do that. If not, we'll just go down the same road that we did before. You got any?
No, nothing.
No? Okay. Third, which we've already started on, Randy and I, are the approval process here. I had a discussion with Jeremy a week ago from this past Friday, and basically we don't have to go through all the land use board meetings and approvals and all that, although he does want us to present a 2-minute presentation on Tuesday, which Randy has raised his hand to do, just to make sure we get the formal approval on it. And the second part of that is the building department, which Randy's already talked to and jumped on, and we're laying out what we need and what we need to get. So that is underway. And then lastly, which will take place shortly after this meeting, we just need to sit down with SLAM and ONG for a few minutes and say, okay, can you get us the drawing? Can you get us the specs? Can you get us the estimates, blah, blah, on a timely basis so that we can meet this deadline in order to pick up the grant? It's as simple as that. So parts are moving. We just need some basic stuff to understand whether this is possible or not, and what it'll take to get it done.
We also have some remediation we have to do, right, Mike? The hygienics came back with a comment about PCBs below the windowsills.
Yes, and I'm meeting with hygienics next Tuesday at 9:30 at the building.
Right.
And to lay out exactly, but he's thinking it's 3 feet out from the building line and 18 inches deep on the areas that tested positive.
And it's only going to be the areas that we're taking down, the
Yes.
demoing.
Yes.
Right. We'll leave the rest of it just as is until we do the full building demolition.
Yeah, so it's, right now, it's that side of the building where the current mini gym and art room are.
Yep.
You look out on the little playground, that's the area that tested hot. The walkway coming down and the part of the new building, they're fine.
Okay. And so we'd obviously have to do the remediation and then give a approval letter or a letter that says it's all been done.
Well, the remediation would be part of the specifications for the demolition.
Okay.
It would be all rolled into one.
Into one, okay.
Yes.
We don't have to have it done in advance, we just have to have
Yeah,
it.
he had asked me, is this a separate spec I'm going to put together, or do I have to be meeting with someone? And I said that I told him I was going to talk to you guys.
What
is that?
Hygienics is gonna have to produce two sets of documents, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2.
Right.
Yes.
They'll need their own plans for identification and all that stuff, so.
And
there'll be
his,
separate contractors doing that remediation work from phase 1 and phase 2.
and his thought was, who do I prepare those plans and specifications for? The school, OG,
It's a document produced
Be the town, I think.
through the town,
Yeah.
but it's furnished to SLAM to be incorporated in their overall construction document set.
Right, all right,
Okay.
yeah, he just wanted to know who do I hand my stuff off to?
Yeah.
Dave, the
Sure it gets
remediation wouldn't
incorporated.
be through you guys, right? It'd be a separate contractor direct to the town, right? For the abatement.
No, we would,
You'd handle it?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have a problem with that. Because again, we typically would solicit for a bid for the demolition and abatement together, because there are so many things with that go hand in hand that it's oftentimes difficult to simply do the abatement separate. So,
And there's no hiccups permit-wise in terms of, like, Kip said, getting that work done early in advance of the actual demo?
As long as Pete, as long as Pete knows we have a full, discussion of a letter and a plan of how we're going to do it, I think he'll be happy. But we have to give it to the building department, for sure.
I think what he was asking is, would you ask him if it's possible to do the work, say, during an April vacation?
Right.
We've got the caulking on the window glass.
Right.
It's got to be abated.
First.
Well, when you do the spot around the
Right.
ground too.
So that has to be done.
It's a
first.
tear
It can't
down.
be done early
Yeah,
in the
it's-
demo.
Right, that's what I was,
Still got to be done with the demo.
Yeah.
Okay.
can it be done during the other make-ready work interior? You know what I mean? So there's gonna be
When they're putting
like
up the
temporary
partitions and
partitions
stuff.
and all
It
that.
would be done
It could be
with-
done during that?
it would be done.
Concurrent?
Right before that.
Concurrent.
Concurrent, okay. It's not a one before the other.
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
It's not like do some asbestos work and you have to like clear the building.
Clear the building out,
Yeah,
okay.
So you're going to meet just for a few minutes afterwards to make sure that everything, okay. Randy, about your work with the regulatory approvals.
Yeah, so we had a good meeting here last week with a lot of the different stakeholders from town departments and Slam and David, where we ironed out specific dates from now all the way through building permits for the full construction project. At a high level, the good news is that there were no showstoppers identified that would kick out the schedule or delay the schedule in any way. However, it is tight. I think P&Z was the one that really didn't allow for any slippage. I'll ask David to go through kind of the specific dates, but the way I think about town approvals are in like the two blocks. We just talked about enabling. It's pretty straightforward. By Tuesday night, tomorrow night, we're gonna get a sign off from P&Z saying we're good. There's really no involvement from our end, I guess, on this. And then it's all about building department, and for that, we've got a lot of time. The real constraint, I think, on enabling is with the refunds from the state, which we've talked about. But on the main building, there was an EPC presentation last night. I've not heard yet the results of that. But I'm assuming that that went smoothly, which would tick that box for us. Next key one to talk about would be Architectural Review Board. I saw an email from Amy go out in the past couple of days looking to get on the schedule for a first meeting with ARB.
Informal,
For
yeah.
informal, and then a follow-on, which will probably be in March, I believe. Dave, do you have any
Yep.
notes on the specific dates for
Yep.
ARB?
Yep, so we're looking for the informal on February 18th, and then the next meeting is March 17th, and that's the meeting where we're setting the goal of acceptance, is what we are targeting.
And what I saw go to, in that email from Amy, were just 2 renderings. And I believe in the meeting will show up, I'm assuming, with some actual tangible examples of facade elements. So that's ARB. What do we have, David, for Zoning Board of Appeals?
Yep, so ZBA, we talked about February 19th, the application is going to be due to them, and that is in preparation for March 18th meeting/public hearing, which again, the discussion was that that's likely a one-meeting process.
Yep. The variance that we're going to be discussing is really just temporary site coverage, because at some point in time, the new footprint, foundation, and school will be, well, at some point, there will be 2 fully completed schools before we knock down the other. So there'll be a breach of site coverage there, and we need approval for that. Next would be P&Z, which happens after EPC, ARB, and ZBA. And that,
We have
David,
the
what do we have?
application going to planning and zoning by March 13th, and then we are going before them at the April 28th meeting, which is the meeting/hearing. And the thought there was that if we can get the the discussion closed at that, then meeting 2 would be held on May 5th, and then meeting 3 would be on May 12th, and that would be the goal for acceptance. And that triggers, that's what Randy was talking about, is that triggers several components as far as the building department, what they need to see, what needs to go to the state for approval, for our approval to bid for phase 2. So
Okay.
that mid-May acceptance by P&Z is very important.
Pretty critical.
Yep.
Yep. Last thing, Kip, I would mention would be, from a scheduling perspective, is the traffic study, just to keep an eye on this. So we do require state DOT, a DOT approval process, which Tig & Bond is assuming for now is very straightforward. It's a process nonetheless, but it's straightforward due to the fact that the entrance to the school under Tig & Bond's recommendation requires no changes whatsoever. But the caveat there that they've mentioned is if for some reason the town itself, i.e. P&Z, requests a change to the entrance, secondary turning lane, anything really there, that can trigger a much more lengthy review from the DOT at the state. And if that happens, well, that could have repercussions to timing of approvals with regards to the reimbursement from the state, because they look to OSTA to make sure that that has been completed as part of the overall preparation of the project commencement.
Mm-hmm.
So we then sent the traffic study, I think it was last week, to Jeremy and to, I believe it was to the fire marshal, so that they're fully aware of like the current state of the findings of the traffic study, which recommend no change, just to get an early clearance to say, hey, we're not necessarily holding this in stone, but do you foresee there being any type of outcome where we would require some sort of change there? So we're just trying to eliminate that source of potential risk as well.
Sounds like you're on it.
A little bit.
David, do you have the updated master plan?
I do.
Outstanding. Do you want to pass that out or not?
I didn't come prepared with copies to hand.
Oh, okay.
I apologize for that, but what I can talk through some of the big points of it if
Sure.
if you'd like. Okay, so again, Randy gave a pretty thorough update of the town approval process, and then, so the last time we really talked about schedule in depth was at the time that we were finishing up schematic design, and we knew that the end of schematic design took a little longer as we were trying to get the design within the confines of the budget. So ONGAP and SLAM spent time going through what's going to lead us up to starting phase 2, getting through design development and getting into the construction documents phase. And we have, without necessarily reducing a lot of durations, we've changed the logic of things. So what's going to happen is we are planning on, before we were talking about finishing design development and then going through the full estimate process and present it to the board, and waiting until that 6 or 7 week period is over before we actually ask SLAM to pick up pencils again on construction documents. We're saying that once they finish design development, we're going to have them go right into construction documents. And part of that leads into the discussion, I think, about this interim estimate that we're talking about doing as another check and balance to make sure that we're on the right path, so that we can, the committee can proceed with a level of comfort in knowing that we're not going to have this vast budget difference when we get to the end of design development. So we were able to regain some of the time that we had spent on schematic design there. We, together with SLAM, we looked at the process to get the approval on construction documents and the estimate, and they proposed to do a stop and plot is what they call it, where they basically say at 90%, they provide us with all of the documents so that we can start the process of coming up with doing the estimate, and they would assign someone to that project to track every change that they make to those documents from that point to when they're done, so that we've already been given a 2-week jump start on the estimate, and then it's a matter of them giving us basically a bullet list of change this, deleted that, so that we can just put numbers to those things without having to sort through hundreds of pages of documents. That's going to help condense that time frame there. So in a nutshell, what we're saying is that the phase 1 is still on track to start when school gets out. What we don't know yet is whether or not we will be able to get the reimbursement from the state of Connecticut for that or not. And what we're now looking at for starting work on site, previously we were at around the beginning of November for starting, but we believe now that we can actually bring that back to the beginning of October.
That'd be great.
So what that does is obviously it helps us to get a little more work in place before winter sets in. So as we go through the next few months, we'll look more at, specifically what activities we can do to maybe accelerate that, get as much of that winter weather affected work behind us before winter sets in. We're going to be dealing with winter conditions on the project no matter what at some point for temporary heat. We are still targeting completion of the building, late June, early July of '22, which would allow us to move from the current Oxridge to the new and allow demolition of the existing Oxridge the summer of '22, and then we would be wrapped up the late fall, early winter of '22, essentially being done with work on site in 2022 with some. There'll be some things, there'll be punch list, and then there's going to be some landscape things that there's going to be, inevitably there's going to be some things when we're planting in late October. There's going to be some things that we come back for in the spring. And what we are still targeting too is we're showing something on the schedule for some site work to happen the summer of 2021. And we're thinking of trying to take a bite out of all of that site work that has to happen once the current Oxridge School is demolished. Let's see if we can at least maybe reconstruct the east parking area to its permanent configuration the summer of 2021 to help ease the amount of work that has to happen after the building comes down in 2022. So we're looking at that. We don't have the details of it ironed out yet, but we're looking at chipping away at it.
Great. You'll be able to send that schedule out to everybody when you're all done with it?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we'll try and print it on larger paper so we can see it.
I don't want you to see too much of the information.
Related to this, David was nice enough to send along an estimate for that midterm estimate that he's going to do, which he will start, I believe, next week.
Yeah, I gave Slam a heads up that it was a topic of discussion for today.
Yep.
And then I think between today, tomorrow, maybe Monday, Slam would be gathering all those documents for us. So we'd be starting early next week.
The cost of this additional estimate is $7,970. Very frankly, I thought it would be twice that. I shouldn't say that.
Well, it actually was until it actually was.
Until you called.
Until
It must have been my
internal
charm.
discussion,
Which I think is very reasonable, and again, we all think it's very important to this, so I'd like to get approval on that if I could.
This is just on O&G side, right? Slam's not doing.
Just over there.
Is there any discussion about that?
I forget what the whole process of the, the value engineering that we did to get to the net acceptable appropriations number. Did that assume state funding?
Oh, it's always
It's always been in there?
totally inclusive.
Right, but I mean, it's in there, so it's taking for granted that money's coming, right?
Well, it's.
The budget is
No.
based on the
It's
gross
not.
It's
cost.
assuming
It's assuming zero.
But
Got
that
it,
number-
okay.
That number is,
That-
Got it.
There's
That's
no
good.
net-
So it's an extra contingency, so to speak.
yes, because you have to go through the process of having your expense considered eligible,
Right.
and you have to make sure that you didn't use if you're using a sole source vendor, you have to justify it. If you
Okay.
didn't justify it, it'll be there's lots of little,
Mhm.
trip wires along the way.
Could take a number of years to receive, too.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Well, if we put our invoices in on time, and we shouldn't have that kind of delay like Greenwich had.
Okay. It's a funding during?
It's a funding during.
Got it, like it's a percent of completion type thing, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they retain a certain amount that they hold until they audit, and that's where we dig out files 7 years after the fact.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
put it this way, don't expect that money right away.
Okay.
Yeah, in
But
other
they
words,
don't pay any interest on that either.
And Dave, I had one question about that sort of procedural. You talked about saving a few weeks with SLAM presenting 90% documents to you so that you can start the estimate earlier. And I assume you've practiced that in the past. It sounds a little bit like, from the architect's point of view, it could be challenging to really track all those changes and then hard for you to go back and then sort of put money on those. And I assume you've done that in the past and it's been successful and it's worthwhile the time that's saved for the challenge.
Another project I'm working on now, we did that, they did a 50%, and they provided us a list of what had changed. So there is a responsibility on the design team there, right, to capture those things for us. And it's easier when you get into phases like construction documents, because they're not making major, that last 10%, 2 weeks, they're not making changes of that big of a nature. They may have a last minute change to say, oh, it's this type of ceiling tile versus another, so you're plugging a unit price in. But you're gathering the majority of the work there. And I think SLAM was looking at, seeing what they had for resources to bring to bear on that, to make sure that nothing was missed during that process.
So I just would, recommend there's some concern, some care going into that, and if on your part, you're worried that that's going to be more challenging than it's worthwhile.
Now, we oftentimes, they ask us to do, leave it at that. Say, listen, we just want you to do 90% and
Okay.
stop there for time's sake, so.
And that's 90% DD?
No, this
CD.
is CD. DD is, where DD documents will be done on or around March 20th. And then that's more of a conventional process. We're getting the full packet.
Right.
We're going to set that in stone, estimate that.
So when do you go out for hard bids then with the CDs?
So, bidding, we are talking about, what we're doing is we're going to the state for the PCR on or around July 20th. And in that time frame, they have approximately, we allow approximately 2 weeks for them to approve the project to bid. Without their approval, there's no funding, so we have to wait for them to give us that letter. That's a drop dead. So we have, sorry, 1 second. We are bidding starting August 3rd, and what we're going to do is we're going to open up the bidding process at one time. However, we're going to do a staggered receipt of bids. What we're going to do is some of the critical contracts, site, concrete, steel, we're going to have a reduced bidding period for those. Something's not plotting right here on that, but we're accepting the critical contracts within 3 weeks, and then we're allowing another 2 weeks for that so that we can start the process for scoping and then bringing you to those trades before the committee for your acceptance that we enter into contract with them. Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
Nick?
thank you.
Great. Rusty, what about our contracts?
It's a good question. I have no answer because I haven't heard from them yet. SLAM I'm talking about. I will give them another nudge.
Please.
Wait, was there an agreement on this?
Oh,
Estimate?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Minor detail.
Are there any more questions concerning the motion to approve this interim payment of $7,970?
7,970.
$7,970. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. It's approved.
Thank you.
Okay. So we skipped over that. Is there any feedback concerning the data meetings to date?
Yeah, just to keep the committee up to speed, we've had a number of internal meetings starting this week with the consultants for SLAM, with the A&V, AV and technology consultants, along with the kitchen and cafeteria consultants this week. We're also holding room data meetings, which are really very important to find as user groups, really faculty and staff at school, looking at each room that the committee is sort of, we've now moved through design development, the location of the room, and then sort of what's inside. So gathering feedback from teachers and staff about items of shelving that they're looking for, the files they need, what kind of floor space might they need, and so on. So that just began yesterday into the evening. We have a full set of room data meetings this afternoon into the evening. And we've heard that that's going to be an iterative process, meaning that we're going to have these first round discussions. We'll bring that information back to the design development committee, continue to iterate that element of it, and then the room level work will come back with drafts, which will come back to those user groups, get another round of feedback. So it seems like a very extensive and thoughtful process to gather feedback from faculty, staff, and district personnel. And then I'm hopeful that all that information can feed into other conversations we've been having about security, about technology. So those conversations are running in parallel. They just started this week, and I'll continue on through the foreseeable future.
Anything to add?
So I participated in the kitchen meeting that we had, and I was very happy with how that went in terms of efficiencies and functionality, and also sustainability component as well. The drawings did have dishwashers in there. We talked about how that might work for students in terms of having reusable trays that their food could go directly on, and what that might mean for silverware. We talked about opportunities to place a water station within the cafeteria. I think that the state guidelines say that there has to be a drinking fountain specifically, but a lot of the schools now have, the more modern drinking fountains that have the bottle fillers. So we talked about having, access maybe to like small reusable cups. Current practice now is that the schools sell little mini single-use water bottles, which, just creates a whole lot of waste. So it seems to me that it would make a lot of sense to move, to just having all kids have access to water, aside from that just being an option on the table versus all of the sugary drinks and stuff. So there were good conversations about really moving the kitchen towards a more sustainable future model.
Were you pleased with their level of professionalism?
Yes, so Mike joined by conference call, the consultant that SLAM had brought in from Pittsburgh, and he had drawings ready to go. There was good conversation about what needs the staffing would need in terms of lockers, and Luke was able to talk about security points versus where receivables are coming in, where the placement of the office is. Does there need to be a line of sight, a window? So I felt like we were able to have a thorough discussion about what the functionality would be for the kitchen staff, and also just in terms of the whole building.
And was the organization so we're transitioning to a new food service in Darien, and they were part of the conversation, that group?
No, so we actually have an interim food service right now, and that will be, please step in if I'm wrong, that will go out to bid this summer as far as who the new permanent people will be for next year. So right now, there was no one to invite.
Okay.
Well, as of yesterday, I have to fill the board in on the developments of the cafeteria negotiations, so
We're on hold.
we're on wait to vote, yes.
The good news is from the food service consultant, we were aware of that, kind of reality check. We'd love to have them at the table at that time. They said that the design that they're working on, similar to FF&E, will then be kind of readjusted and based on the realities of who that food service provider would be. So it's one of those elements where certain parts of it would have to be set in stone in terms of the build out, but certain things in terms of the kind of equipment that would be desired, and some elements of it might be more flexible, so that when there's the new food service folks on board, we could then reintegrate them and they could still design around it.
Right. And one other important thing that was built into this design that comes back to other pieces of the design was that the kids' lines, their receiving lines where they come in and get their food, was double. So currently there's only one. So having kids be able to come from two sides and check out will drastically increase the efficiency, which I think would then give us a lot greater flexibility to be able to have that reduced number of waves that we're building the cafeteria size for.
That's good.
So one other question, just in general, I guess, I assume the Board of Ed is really sort of monitoring the development of all the different spaces in terms of like the broader picture of the town-wide sort of directions that the Board of Ed would like to go in with learning and with all these different functions. In terms of, is there somebody who's kind of keeping track and sort of making sure that the Board of Ed's on board with all of that and as future plans for this town? Does that make sense?
Just talk more, there's a future plan design, what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess just in terms of sort of new initiatives that we're putting in place in the school, that everybody's on board with, this is the direction we're going in. I mean, just from equipment in the classroom to what we're doing in the cafeteria versus sort of learning corridors, and there are a lot of exciting, important directions that we're going in.
But like one example would be moving from 6 ways to 3 ways. Is that
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, typically, Duke and myself, we give regular updates to the Board of Education. There may come a time where not necessarily we get a time out and do a broader sort of all-encompassing review with them a little bit. But yeah, they're on board with the direction we're on.
Anything else to bring up about the project right now? Yes.
Just an update on the solar panels. Favorite topic. We could not find anyone, any even small solar panel guys who was willing to take on the PPA and move it to another location. So that is off the table. It has to do with the size of the project, which is tiny, and the technology, which is antiquated. It's hard to believe that 10 years later it's antiquated, but it is. And the degradation of the panels themselves, they degrade 1.5–2% a year, so no one really wanted to do it. That being said, we are looking at one other option, which I think is very viable, and this is with the current holder of the PPA, and that is take the 3 or 4 rows of panels that are going to be affected, and there is room, we think, on the existing roof to replace them in place, hook them back up again. And what that'll do, it'll buy us 2 years of time that we get some benefit out of these. And at the end of that, we'll pull the panels off, see if we can get any money for them, and the balance of the PPA will have to be an expense. I don't know if it's a building expense or what it is, but we have to figure out what to do with that.
So, Rusty, were you suggesting that the panels that will be impacted by the demolition would be just moved by an in-house team, like Mike's team, for example, to the back of the building?
You have to get a permit to do
Company.
it. And somebody, no, they're gonna take care of it.
Okay,
This
but just
company.
moving it to another location on the Oxbridge
Yeah,
roof?
if you look at an aerial, there's plenty of space right around the other panel to squeeze most of it in. They're actually supposed to send a guy out this week to look at it.
Do you think the energy savings will exceed the cost to move them?
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it doesn't,
Okay.
we just throw them,
Decoration.
throw the
Decoration.
floor lines
Yeah.
away, and we'll have to negotiate something with the current PPA holder.
So you could potentially continue to operate the remaining panels, just remove that section where the existing.
That's another option if it's too costly to move.
Literally cut it off and continue to rather than get thereafter. And what's our commitment in terms of, or what's the penalty in breaking this contract? Or
Assume that we just threw it away starting in June or May of this year. It's about $275,000.
Wow.
It is not cheap.
Wow.
That we're only, what, 10 years into a 25-year thing?
Whoa.
I don't know why the decision was made to put it on an
Nice.
old roof.
Right, right.
That roof is failing anyhow, or close to it.
50-year-old school.
When was the
It is
installation?
what it is.
When was the installation on that again?
Probably about 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
09.
The problem is the technology is such that the panels, the older panels, they have to be plugged into an inverter.
A big inverter.
A big inverter. Now they all have, the panels have their own
They're not
inverters built in.
separate ones, and they're strung together.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the good news is the panels are actually fairly large, larger than I thought they would be in terms of productivity, so we may be able to get a few bucks for those.
Anything else?
Is there any update on the borings for the geotech?
Not on site yet.
Not on site yet, but that was where SLAM had a problem with the contract and they renegotiate. I don't know. I'm told it's done now, but we'll find out when Amy comes today and ask her specifically. But then they have to reschedule it and all that stuff. And then the other problem was they painted the marks on the ground where the borings were, and the snow came.
They're still visible, though.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, they're
Well, that's
still
because the
visible.
snow is gone, but when the snow is there, they can.
The first day they were supposed to do it, it snowed that night. Yeah. Just covered all the marks.
Good timing. Brilliant. Is there any public, I'm sorry, Dr.
I
Riley.
just wanted to give the committee just a wee update that the security sort of committee met last 2 weeks ago, and it meets again next week. And we had various members of our own staff, obviously first responders, and other key constituents at the table, SLAM and their consultant, Nick D'Agostino. So we basically went through what the state requirements are, what we must have. They handed out a matrix of those things. We talked about currently what our practices are, both culturally and structurally. And really the next meeting is coming back and say, okay, well, so here's sort of their suggestion of a sort of infrastructure based on what was said and what currently we have to do and that type of thing. So that'll be next week, next Thursday. So that continues to move forward.
It's underway. Are there any public comment?
Since Amy walked in, do you mind answering Nick's question about the geotech borings as far as whether they're on the calendar? Do you happen to know?
They are on the calendar. For some reason, yesterday there was an email that they pushed to a Thursday, Friday instead of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Of what week?
Next week.
Thank you.
Sorry. It was supposed to start the 12th. So now whatever day of the week, yeah.
Thursday is the 13th, Friday's the 14th.
This was on Friday the 13th.
Anything else? I'm sorry?
One final thing. So Luke and I were talking again about finding a date for the next update to the Ox Ridge community, including neighbors. And we wanted to suggest to the committee that potentially the evening of March 5th.
March 5th? And we'll hopefully have drawings?
That was our hope. I know that the completion of design development won't be done, but our design workshops will be completed by then.
So we should have enough.
If the committee felt comfortable that that was a good time going forward.
So it's March 5th. That's what day is it?
That's a Thursday.
What Thursday?
What time?
So usually we have our evening meetings around 7.
Okay.
Dave, if that's something that you would be able to attend, we
Well,
would
that's what I
certainly love to
knew
have
you
you.
had asked, and I have a meeting in Torrington that goes until 5, so that was the only thing, but I can be out here for 7.
Okay, we can also be flexible with the timing if 7:30 makes it easier for you. I'm happy to chat more about that. Okay, fantastic.
Because you want to talk about what, school safety during the
Right,
construction?
so one of the big pieces will,
Yeah.
that I think the community will be interested in, obviously, is seeing what the building is going to look like. We haven't presented any drawings, so that will be an
Right.
exciting piece. But, another real component is going to be like, what are we going to be living through for the next couple of years, and how are we going to keep the kids safe? And I think, if Dave were able to come and stand in front of that community, that would just be a really nice connection for them to hear firsthand from him how that process is managed.
We should probably have the demo design at the same time.
Yeah, I think that would be great. The more information that we can give.
Well, so they can know what's not going to be there, what will be there.
Right.
Our hope is to talk through exactly whatever version that we're able to show of the new school, enabling phase and what that will be.
Right.
And then the conversation we've been having about the safety protocols that are already built into place, both in terms of physical safety of the plant as the construction's occurring, and then personnel safety. So those would be the 3 big buckets we'd want to talk through.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Yeah,
Good.
and so we can firm up more about like how the presentation will go, and obviously anyone is welcome to attend from the committee. I think it would be great if we could have you know, like if Duke, if you could come just to speak from your educational experience. Dr. Adley, we'd love to have you if you're available.
Yeah, if you don't mind me piggybacking that,
Absolutely.
because the board chair and I have been talking about, you know, progress update, and it might be, I see to give, I'll have to connect with Tara, but I think it is at appropriate time now for the board to actually see a schematic, right? Because really, in that regard, back to your question, and I don't want that to go too far ahead, right? And I think they need to get a wee sense themselves a wee bit, so I might try to schedule on February 25th an update to the Board of Education.
Great.
I think it'd just be useful for them, because there's different variations of Common Bond, right? From the pods to so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
it just might be helpful to give them a schematic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we
I'm more
do-
than happy to come to it.
And we have to go back to the RTM and update them, and I'm sure the Board of Selectmen is going to want to hear an update. We'll all be updated. Okay.
One meeting.
Duke, you're going to be everywhere.
One meeting in the auditorium downstairs.
Everybody.
Come one, come all.
So that's a question too for Amy, whether, yeah, I guess March 5th and potentially.
March 5th works for me, and then the other day, Dr. Hadley, is that an evening meeting?
It is, it's 25th.
7:30 usually, Amy.
With
So
March
that day,
25th?
there's an informal.
No, March 5th, and then February 25th.
February 25th, we have an informal meeting with the planning and zoning, but I believe that's really late, 8 o'clock? What time do your? board
7:30.
meetings? That's tight.
Maybe we can work with, you're meeting with Jeremy and company?
It looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
Would you meet me at that? Because I have a conflict that, I have another building committee meeting that night.
Board of Ed? Do you think we need Dave at Board of Ed update?
As long as we have one representative somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll get too technical.
And, you know, perhaps Kemp and I can
Yeah.
provide and concur too. so-
Sure, good.
Okay. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Rusty, Duke, all in favor? Thank you all very much.